there, welcome to another Game of the Week. This week's game is NieR Automata, and I'm here to... okay. Unlike the previous videos in the series, I won't be presenting this game in terms of a pros and cons format. Instead, I'd like to take a bit of extra time to properly detail a few things so as to give a better understanding of the seriously turbulent love-hate relationship I have with this game. But before we delve deeper, what is NieR Automata? NieR Automata is a Japanese action RPG developed by Platinum Games and published by Square Enix. It's published for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. So yes, you heard that right. I have a love-hate relationship with this game. For the sake of context, the first half of this video will be spent explaining why I hate Automata. There are many things that NieR Automata does wrong from start to finish, or that at least I personally find annoying. We won't go into every detail, of course, but let's start from the very beginning and work our way through. Also, important disclaimer here, this entire video contains major spoilers for NieR Automata. Please view at your own risk. And with that, let's get into it. The main menu. Calm and ambient. I can't even remember back to what kind of person I was the first time I opened NieR Automata. I was a different person back then. So young, so innocent. Nah, I'm just kidding. But I do remember one thing, and that is that I had never played Automata before. All I knew about the game beforehand is that it supposedly was a very philosophical game. And I'm a bit of a nerd, so why not? Except I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I really didn't. The first thing that awaits you in the game is a tutorial stage of 40 minutes, give or take. The tutorial itself is well executed. It teaches the player everything they have to know one step at a time in tandem with the happenings of the plot. You play as a character by the name 2B, a bootylicious lady that can kick some serious ass. But this is where we already start to see problems, most notably, what the actual is this gameplay? In one moment we're playing a top-down space shooter, and the next we're playing from a sideways view. Soon after we've ditched the space shooter entirely and are instead playing through a linear gameplay sequence seen from a third-person perspective. You might be asking, well, is that so weird? To which my reply is, no, I realize these types of perspective shifts are used in other video games as well, but in NieR Automata, it happens all the time. Trust me, this is not the last you'll see of it. After the tutorial, we're given a good ol' exposition dump, providing us the setup for the game's plot. In 5012 AD, Earth was invaded by aliens using machines as their war tool, and the few humans that survived fled to the moon. Nearly 200 years later, humanity launched a counterattack with the creation of their own, the androids, but with little success. To this day, humanity is still at war with the aliens, pitting the androids and machines against one another. 2B and 9S are two such androids fighting on behalf of humanity through YoRHa, the android organization established to fight this war. At this point, I thought, sure, that's all well and good, I suppose, but what's up with this blatant exposition? Something tells me this could have been executed better, but oh well. Now this is where the main bulk of the game begins. It's time for a new shift in the gameplay: open world exploration. Most of the game happens here, in this space. This is the map. Take a good look at it. No, really, look. As for the open world itself, despite its relatively small size, there are so many different types of areas ranging from city ruins all the way to forests and deserts. The transitions between different areas are therefore painfully obvious at times, and why did they do this? These invisible walls! Still, the space often feels absurdly open and empty despite it being so cramped. There are a few enemies here and there, and the combat is kind of flashy and cool, but fishing huge-ass tires from the ocean is honestly more interesting than engaging enemies most of the time, unfortunately. Another unfortunate thing is that this is where the game is essentially reduced to a string of stereotypical RPG quest lines. After finding the resistance group you're supposed to aid, you're tasked with, well, the main quests, which usually amount to moving out, hunting down a target, and killing said target. Oh, but don't worry, the changing camera angles and different types of gameplay are here to stay. I find that this game quickly becomes taxing to play due to its constantly changing gameplay. Ironically, or unironically, this was a deliberate choice made by Yoko Taro, the mastermind behind the game.
いろんなトリプルAのタイトルを見て、すごく面白いな、美しいなと思うんですけれども、プレイし始めて 20分ぐらいすると、あとこれが20時間続くのかっていう気持ちになって、ちょっとそれに疲れちゃったんですよね。で、できればそういう未来が見えない、もうちょっと不安定な変化し続けるゲームを作りたいなと思って。
I get your intention, Yokotaro, but it just doesn't jive with me, at least not in the context of this game. Anyway, I've only talked about the gameplay aspect thus far. It's impossible to fully understand NieR Automata without taking the mood and tone into account as well. When first playing this game, the initial thought that hit me was, oh my god, this game is trying to be edgy. That might sound judgmental, which it absolutely is, but that's what I thought at the time. The most obvious thing about the tone I found kind of edgy is the muted colors and sometimes monochrome filter. But mark my words when I say it does not end with the color palette. This sense of edginess bleeds into every aspect of the NieR Automata experience. For instance, enemies you fight say and do absurd, unexpected things. So yeah, weird stuff. There's also the fact that a lot of tragic things happen to different characters throughout the course of the game, and there are tons of references to real-life philosophers and philosophical schools of thought that in some way or another can be associated with existentialist philosophy. Ugh, that was a lot. As previously stated, I am a bit of a nerd, philosophy being one of the things I find very interesting, but with a narrative and so many plot elements so unexpected to me, I couldn't help but feel like the game was trying to be edgy for edgy's sake.
Everything that lives is designed to end. We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death.
Are you hearing this? They're trying so f***ing hard. And even though this all seems edgy, why does everything feel so lifeless? I don't even understand why I'm doing anything at this point. What's the point of all this stuff? I feel like I'm doing random stuff for no reason other than the fact that some authority told me to do so. Anyway, moving on. One important part of NieR Automata is understanding how its playthroughs work. Yes, playthroughs. By the time you've completed the game, you haven't. That's because you've only played through once and reached ending A. If you reboot the same save file, the game will start all over again, telling the exact same story as in playthrough 1, but from 9S's perspective rather than 2B's. Now my question is, how do you expect normal players to latch onto this with nothing but a note after the first credits? Anyway, back to playthrough 2. Since 9S is an intel unit rather than a combat unit, the way you play 9S is a bit different as well, introducing a new gameplay mechanic, hacking! This appears to be the shift in gameplay that most people hate, though this is actually the one that bothers me the least. I actually find this bullet hell shooter minigame kinda fun. But yeah, other than this and a few different scenes, it's basically old news, and by the end of it, you reach ending B. Playthroughs 1 and 2 do grant two major revelations, however. In playthrough 1, we learn that the aliens actually went extinct some time ago, killed by none other than the machines, their very own creations. In playthrough 2, we learn something even crazier, that humanity is also extinct and has been so for thousands of years, so long that they were never part of the conflict to begin with. Aliens arrived on Earth long after the humans disappeared. This is a really huge deal. Obviously. Sadly, I barely found myself fazed by this because I was too occupied being annoyed with all the previously mentioned bullshit. Now, the last playthrough, playthrough 3, features a completely different series of events from the first two, and to sum it up all nicely, basically everything our beloved characters know and love comes crashing down, and they start their deep dive into a spiral of existential crisis and misery. Such edgy. This playthrough leads to endings C and D. Which one you get depends on the choice you make at the end. Luckily, a chapter select feature is unlocked so that you can make both choices to see both endings if you please. So, are we done yet? Unfortunately, not quite. But we're not far off. When you've experienced all endings mentioned thus far, endings A, B, C, and D, you unlock the final ending, Ending E. This is the ending you get if you make the choice to save our beloved protagonists from being lost for good, and it leads to the final boss battle. The end credits. Yup, you have to beat the names of the credits. It's impossible to do on your own, so you eventually have to ask for help from other players in order to complete it. When you finally overcome, one final cutscene is played, it fades to black, and it seems we're finally done. But only almost. The game presents you with one final proposal. Do you wish to give up your save data in order to help another player in need? At this point, I was just so frustrated and confused. Seriously, is the game asking me to give up my 40 hours worth of effort? Why the hell would I do that? So I made the decision to keep my save file, to see what would happen. And nothing changed. I therefore went back, replayed the final segment, and gave up my save file on the second try. The only difference this time is that you're forced to watch the game delete your progress bit by bit until it's all gone, and the entire ordeal ends with the game saying this.
Thank you. Thank you for playing.
Alright, that was that. Good f***ing riddance. And with that, I turned off the game, put down my PlayStation controller, and went on with my life, thinking I'd never return. After I put NieR Automata aside, I just couldn't help but feel like I was missing something important. I remembered a song from the game that really stuck with me, and that to this day still strikes a deeply emotional chord in me. And I thought to myself, yes, NieR Automata was a weird experience. It felt like a game with tiresome gameplay that lacks cohesion. It has a setting that sometimes feels like somewhat empty, wasted potential at times. The convoluted lore and references can sometimes feel pretentious, but there must be more to NieR Automata than meets the eye. And so, my curiosity led me into a whirlwind of research in a last-ditch attempt to understand this mess of a game. And that's when things started to change for me. The biggest research I did was watching other people's reviews of the game. It turns out a lot of people have opinions on this. There are a few people who agree with me on the issue of incohesive and somewhat boring gameplay, which I still find very understandable for the most part. Then there's the occasional review done by a person who didn't get the memo about there being multiple playthroughs, so their reviews encompass only what playthrough 1 has to offer, and are inaccurate, to say the least. But based on most reviews, the general consensus seems to be clear. That Automata is a really great game, maybe even a masterpiece, that conveys a message in a way that only a game can, and that has made an impact that will shape the way we think about video games in the future. I thought NieR Automata was a game I had come to dislike, even despise, but the more I thought about it, the more it grew on me. I started to realize that the message Automata attempts to convey is a very complex yet fundamental and essential one. The nature of purpose and the never-ending struggle to achieve it. The androids fight for one reason alone, to protect humanity and reclaim the Earth that is rightfully theirs. Their purpose is duty. It drives their every move and justifies their every action. You are spoon-fed the same propaganda over and over again. The machines don't have feelings, nothing they say or do makes sense. They are the enemy and must be destroyed. But it turns out that the machines too are trying to find a purpose of their own. The very being considered your enemy is acting as if it's human, not the emotionless piece of scrap the androids are making it out to be. This storytelling trope of seeing humanity in machines is a fairly common one in media, but surprisingly enough, NieR Automata isn't predominantly concerned with this in particular. Instead, Automata uses this as a device to better examine how the very things that make us human will ultimately lead to our downfall. The pursuit of meaning is a cycle of struggle that keeps repeating itself, and it has been doing so throughout all of human history. When the machines try to find meaning for themselves, this too always results in destruction and despair in some way or another. The story of NieR Automata can therefore be said to be the story of a world without meaning. A world in which, no matter what meaning it is you cling to, be it peace, religion, vanity, family, war, or anything else, you will eventually find yourself lost, stripped of everything that keeps you sane, and left in the void of utter anguish and meaninglessness. This is what happens when 9S learns of humanity's extinction. The god that once gave him a purpose in life no longer exists, and he no longer has a reason to go on living. He still attaches a lot of purpose to his relationship with 2B, which is enough to keep him going for a while, but when she eventually dies halfway into the game, his journey towards batshit insane truly begins. The last bit of sanity he possesses is spent creating a new purpose through violence and senseless slaughter, and this is what ultimately puts his life to an end. Meaninglessness, the dreaded sensation I felt during my first experience with Automata, ties directly into the game's narrative, and I didn't even realize it. But that aside, there was one other thing I learned, a realization that would really come to open my eyes, and that is the understanding that the game medium can tell stories and deliver experiences in a way that perhaps no other medium can. And it's about a lot more than just the aspect of interactivity itself. You see, I used to believe that video games are all about self-indulgence and excitement for the player. I used to think a game should always state its intentions clearly, make the player understand exactly what they're doing and why, and promise the player rewards for everything they do. However, NieR Automata did the unexpected for me. Its intentions weren't always clearly stated. The game made me struggle many times without serving me the reason why on a silver platter. And rather than aiming to boost the player's ego at every given opportunity, the game challenges the player to show genuine compassion and empathy for others. There are multiple examples of this in the game, but there is one instance that stands out from the rest. Remember the final boss I mentioned earlier? After you beat the end credits, you can choose to delete your save file in exchange for becoming one of the ships that one day might help someone else through that very boss battle. If you choose to lend your aid to another player, you need to give up on all of your progress thus far, even though you will never get the satisfaction of knowing who you end up helping and when. As Extra Credits puts it in their video on the matter, this is a true sacrifice. It's a choice that requires the player to act with true compassion and empathy. And it is through this ingenious usage of mechanics that allows NieR Automata to deliver its final narrative point. The world might be a meaningless place, but we can collectively give it meaning by being truly compassionate and looking to the future with an open mind. Was this truly the intention of the designers and developers, or is it merely the result of the fanbase's analysis and understanding of things? It's hard to tell for sure which is which, though I'd like to think it's a little bit of both. But then again, that doesn't necessarily matter when it all comes down to it. If anything, this all proves how video games can truly be art. Something that means different things to different people, and that brings value into people's lives. Okay, that's nice and all, but what does all of this ultimately mean for me? Well, I still hate NieR Automata. I still hate how scrambled and frustrating the game itself can be at times, but I can't help but admit, I love it all the same. One thing I've come to love about the gameplay experience is just the sensation of taking a stroll in an area and enjoying the scenery. In fact, I largely love NieR Automata for the same reason I love Horizon Zero Dawn. You are so small in comparison to the world around you, not just in terms of physical space, but in terms of time. The world has had such a long history prior to the current story taking place, and the sheer size of it all fills me with melancholy, awe, and hope, all at the same time. But there's also another reason I love NieR Automata. It provided me with an experience unlike anything I had ever had before. An experience that shifted my perspective overall, and that gave me something to think about. The truth is, before NieR Automata, I used to be judgmental towards video games. I often bought into the typical societal view that games are bad for you, that it's a mindless, brain-dead form of entertainment that creates nothing but addiction, and that just wastes your money and precious time. I somehow believed, even if just implicitly, that video games don't matter. But they do matter. Just like every other form of media, games can convey meaning through the stories they tell, or even the stories they make us tell ourselves. So many communities have been created as a result of video games. Video games can make people think and start important conversations. Video games have changed and even saved lives. Now, this isn't me saying that NieR Automata is an amazing game because it's so meaningful. Heck, I'm not even here to convince you that NieR Automata is a good game at all. You need to figure that out for yourself. And remember, I still hate this game, at least to a certain extent. This game could definitely have delivered the same story while granting the player a better, more wholesome gameplay experience. Honestly, there are so many things I could say. I'm still trying to fully understand what my opinion of this game really is in all its complexity, even till this very day. But I do know one thing for sure. NieR Automata changed me. It has made me appreciate the world and universe we live in more. It has made me rethink everything I thought I knew about video games. And possibly most crazy of all is that it came into my life at a time where I felt completely lost, and it gave me a new inspiration, a new goal in life, to walk the path of game development in hopes of creating experiences that one day might impact someone else's life for the better, the way NieR Automata once did for me. And that was all, folks. That was my journey with NieR Automata, my love-hate relationship with it, and how it fundamentally impacted my life. What a roller coaster ride this has been, am I right? As you can tell, this video is a bit longer than the previous ones I've made in this series. My fascination with this game is hard for me to put eloquently into words, no matter how many times I try to do it, so I'm truly grateful for your patience. I played Automata for the first time in early 2019, so it's taken me approximately 3 years of contemplation, including 1 month of script writing, in order to produce this video. It's easy to get caught up in the bliss of life-altering realizations. I mean, this whole deal has, for me, almost been transcendent, for lack of a better term, like some sort of spiritual awakening, almost. The point is, waiting this long has given me enough time to both mentally and emotionally distance myself from the game. Many of the things I've said are somewhat over-exaggerated or over-dramatized for the sake of humor and clearer communication, but it still represents my most honest take on the game itself and this situation as a whole. I therefore hope this has made for the most informative and entertaining experience I can deliver. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the game, and make sure to let me know what game has made you think twice about something. Perhaps you've played a game that changed the game for you? Get it? So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and until the next video, bye! See ya!
Jeg roper med alt jeg har, selv om mine ord ikke når fram. Denne byrden jeg bærer for stor for meg. Mitt hjerte går i strid, jeg kjemper for alt jeg tror og vil, men jeg lengter bare etter en ting. At uansett hva som hender, vil jeg forbli hos deg, kjære